Composing Gloves here, and today we're going to be looking at the glide command, one of the most confusing commands because it behaves differently in slice samples versus non-slice samples. There's special versions of it that exist, such as in the sampler. There's an option to have a glide command right here. You can see a glide 01, and this behaves differently than you might think it does. And so we're going to be checking out the glide command, as well as you can check the timestamps for this as well. We'll also be covering manipulating the ticks per line to get instant sample transposition on slices. A very, very useful technique by reducing the lines per tick to 1 and then using a pitch up or pitch down command, which will be instant since those depend on the lines per tick. But that is, again, something that we'll cover a little bit later. Very, very handy technique. So let's dive into this. What is the glide command? So here I've got a single cycle waveform, and I'm going to put down a note, and I'm going to put down a second note. So here's our second note. So if we play it right now, nothing too crazy. It's just going to go da-da, you know, ta-da. So the glide command is an interesting one because what it does is it says, hey, when this note happens, glide to the note. And the note that it glides by, how much? How much does it glide by? Well, it'll glide by, let's just say, 1 semitone. So the first number is the number of semitones, and the second number is 1/16 of a semitone. So this would be like a semitone in 1/16. So that's what's going on there. So if we wanted a semitone in 8/16, like halfway, this would be like a semitone in halfway. So that's what the second one is. So it's basically just a smaller value. So right now it's going to glide up by 1. My question to you is, will it glide up enough to get to the E, the da-na, or will it only glide up by 1 semitone? That's the question. I hope you got your guesses ready. Here we go. That's right. It doesn't actually get to E. It'll only go up 1 semitone. Now I got a new question for you. If I put down an F, that is 15 semitones. Will it glide past the E, or will it stop at E? Will it go dun, dun, you know what I mean? Will it go to the E, or will it go past it? Because we said glide F number of semitones. Get your guesses ready. Here we go. That's right. It only goes to the E. So the E is interesting. This note right here sets a cap. It cannot go past this, but it can also not reach it. So if you have one glide command, it might not be enough to reach it. And this is one of the confusing things about the glide command, because you might think, oh, it's got to get to the E because it's, that's what note you said to play. But that's not how it works. We actually need to include additional glide commands afterwards. And 0, means repeat the value last stored here. So last stored value was a 1, 0. So it's going to play, these are all like 1 zeros. So these are all going to glide by 1 semitone. And we get a glide up, and it stops when it hits E. So if we had a bunch of these, it wouldn't matter because it's going to stop when it hits E. Now, okay, so that's the first pitfall, is understanding exactly how these glides work. Now, of course, we could increase it like on the next one. So we could say glide 1 and then, glide 15. We'll hit the E, on this line guaranteed, instead of having to go through a few more lines. But if we do not have a command here, these glide commands aren't connected to an initial note event. And because of that, they won't glide. There's going to be no gliding because they're not connected to a note. There has to be a note that it's gliding to. So this command here, this note command, you might want to place earlier if you intend to hit the E, to reach the E by the time we get to line 4. But just to show you, these won't work because there's no initial command. See, it's instant. And if we had glide commands beforehand, we also won't get anything because there's no note command telling it to glide. So the glide command requires a note command, and then it will begin to glide towards it. See, so that's also instant. But if as soon as we put a command down, now this is an interesting one because these are all 0, right? So you think, oh, well, they're all 0, but there's no prior value, so it shouldn't glide. You'll be wrong because this column has had a value before. So because of that, the zeros will actually copy the last value like in memory. So you always want to define one beforehand, so that you know what the behavior will be. If you don't, the glide command might do something here. So for example, this one, it will glide because there was a command there before. And now it'll start gliding when it hits this command because these two aren't connected to any kind of a note event. And this is what it sounds like. And it glides still, even though these are all zeros, because again, there was a value in that note column before. If we actually add a note column and we delete these, and we put a glide command here, and we don't give it a value, this won't do anything because there was no prior, this column didn't exist before. So since it didn't exist, this actually won't have any glide value. And in this case, it didn't glide at all, so it stayed on the same note. There's another thing to watch out for with the glide command. So glide command, pretty useful, but it is a bit strange. If you put an FF, that has a special property where it will be instant. So anytime you put a GFF, the glide will be instantaneous. And that is the glide command. There's one other case I was thinking of that escapes me. I'm recording this after the fact because I totally forgot to explain how this glide command over here works. So if you turn this on, if you hit mono, when you play notes as like separate things on like your keyboard. So when you do that, you might think that, oh, it's mono. And if you put a glide command, this glide command will always be on there, right? You might be under the impression that if you were to come over here and write in notes, that the glide command would be applied. But it's not. All the glide commands are actually entirely separate, and that specific command is for when we record playing live. So it's only for when you're actually playing your keyboard. So if I actually play back and, you know, the keyboard's not responding how I think it should. Anyways, you can see glide commands everywhere, and it is the setting that we set here. So if I were to, you know, let's see if I can get a actual thing going here. I don't know what the heck's up with the keyboard. And right now it's mono. So you notice that some spots it doesn't occur, but that's because there's note off commands, where these ones have overlapping notes, so the glide command is inserted. So that is specifically what this glide setting controls. And you're actually able to type in glide commands directly into it. There's a whole bunch. Maybe I'll do a video just on these. But let's say that we have some notes here. You can actually put a G and then the number of semitones, like it says down here, right in. So we could take this and put it in. I believe G0 still copies the glide until it works, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can actually have tiny glide commands as well if you want to use one of the, like this is technically the volume column. But hey, you put a G there, it knows what to do. So anyways, a couple extra little things I forgot to include about the glide command, and back to wherever I put this in the main video. And in my experience, whenever you have like multiple commands like this, whatever the furthest command is the one that'll be adhered to. So for example, if we make this one 1 and this one F, it'll look at the one that says GF and it will ignore the G1. See, instantaneous. But as soon as we lose this one, it looks at this one. So if you have like more than one glide command, it's just going to ignore all the ones. Go for the one that's the furthest right. So that is the glide command. If you do something with polyphony, like let's say you've got two notes here, and you want this one to glide to an F and this one to glide to a B, they will only listen to one glide command that is the most right. So I'm going to put one down. If I put down 1, each one will only glide by 1 semitone. Oh, and this is playing monophonically too. Oh no, that makes perfect sense because it's C, C, and they're both gliding by 1 semitone towards these values. So there's going to be no difference because they both only went up 1 semitone. But if we change this to like, I don't know, an E. they'll both glide by the same amount. You can't do like individual glide amounts unless you want to use a second column. So right, I could just as easily put this over here, and then I could have a glide amount. Maybe I want this one to glide by 3. And we lose this one. And I could do my glides that way. Now this one, terrible example because this is right next to it. Let's do something else. You know, different glide amounts. But you get the idea. So that's the glide command, sort of in a nutshell. And some things you can do with it, like I mentioned before. Did you see that? You see how far I pushed that and it didn't move? What the heck was the deal with that? So we're going to put down a C, and then let's say I want to get to a G. I'm pushing G. And okay, so we'll put down a glide, and we'll say, okay, I want to get to the G by the time I hit 4. And so that involves a 5th. So maybe I say, hey, here, glide 2, glide another one, and then glide another 2. So that by the time we hit 4, we'll hit the G. And so that's what I meant by placing your note values maybe a bit earlier if you intend to hit notes at a specific spot. And this could also be a cool way to make 2 intervals meet each other. So maybe while this G is happening, we have a G over here, and this one's gliding down to a C. And we could even copy the same values. And so this is going to glide this way, and they should meet at a harmony right there on line 4. We have like lines going, you know, every which way. You know, you get crazy with it. And you can begin to mess with the values in between. Something that I've experimented with, and it's been sort of it was an interesting idea. I don't know how much I'd use it. If you do a linear interpolate, so start at like G, you know, 1, just so we have a defined starting point. And then over time, we go to like, you know, GFF, which would be instant. We can have the glide speed up over time by hitting Control I. So this will linearly interpolate it to GFF. So these slides will be slower. So if you have like a phrase, these will be like all loosey-goosey. And they'll get faster and faster until here. Unless you're dealing with like really big intervals. But even then, still the glides will be much faster here. So if we had like a G, a C, and then we took this, copied it, and, you know, this is kind of a crap example, but you get the idea. It gets sharper as we go. So you could have a phrase start off kind of blurry and then get faster. And then, of course, this will be more pronounced over a longer pattern. Why is my mouse wheel not mouse wheeling? Oh, the mysteries I have today with the keyboard. All right. So anyways, that is the glide command. Now the glide command, when you're dealing with sliced samples, gets even weirder. For example, I have here a breakbeat. Go to the sampler, and we've got it like triggering different samples, right? So if I put down a sample, let's also lose one of these columns here. And we'll put down a sample. We'll put down an F and then another sample. So as I play it right now, we expect it to, you know, hit these different slices as we go. So we see it hits that one just fine. What if I put a glide command here? What happens? Because before, you know, it would see this as a slice. So does it still see it as a slice? The answer is no, it's no longer a slice. It is now a note. So this will no longer trigger that slice. Instead, it'll re-trigger the previous slice. Bless you, whoever is sneezing. It'll re-trigger the previous slice, and it'll try and glide, you know, this number of semitones towards this note. So maybe we'll give it a value like E or something. So it's going to try and glide here, or let's make it 1 and put a bunch. And it's going to take this one and glide it up to this note. And if we actually look at this. Oh, you know what too? Let's make these C sharps so that it's only going to trigger the first bit. So we see that all three are in here and one of them is pitched, where the other ones aren't. And if we even add a loop command on the first slice, which is this one, and we make it like, I don't know, let's ping pong it, why not? So you see it never leaves the slice. Which this is pretty cool, but again, it's a behavior that if you don't know precisely how the glide command works, it could be a very confusing command to use. And so if I lose this command, these will be ignored, and this will trigger a slice. So kind of a cool way to work with things. So anyways, that is how it works with the slices. Let's go ahead and move on over to the instantaneous transposition idea here, because it sort of ties in here. So let's say that I've got, you know, the same thing. Let's go back. And let's say that I want to transpose this sample using the, you know, the up command, the pitch up command. And I want to transpose it up too. And it takes a certain amount of time to do that. And we could, of course, have it keep going afterwards. But what if we want it to be more discrete and be instantaneous? This would be, you know, typically like, you know, how would you do something like that? Well, the way I found to do it was you can use a global command. So if you use the Z and then the K command, this controls the lines, the ticks per line. So if you go into your song options, you can have where are you? Song options. I know you're in here. You can have a defined ticks per line. It's defaulted to 12. If you do it at 1, this command takes the ticks per line to do its thing. And before we messed with lines per beat to do it, but we can actually change this. If we set this to 1, it would take 1 tick per line, which would mean this would have to be an instantaneous slide. It would have to basically just transpose it. And then we could set it back to 12 after. Now the highest this can go, I believe, is 16. And if we try and go higher, yeah, 16 is as high as you're allowed to go with this. So we'll set this back to 12. And I wonder if it'll actually update while we're looking at it. I've never had this open. So we'll set this to 1. And then, so these will all be instantaneous. Now they'll be very discrete. And then at the end, we'll set it back, because you might have other commands that rely on the ticks per line to work. So this may not always be a solution, but I found that most of the time it's fine. Like, I usually don't run into an issue where I need it. We'll set it back to C afterwards, which is 12. Yeah, it does. You can actually see it work. And just to show you, we'll make these like F so that they're more discrete. So instantaneous, instantaneous, instantaneous. And we'll just lose these for the moment. And so if I set this to something slower like C, you get that 1, which, you know, that wasn't exactly what we wanted. So if you put it at 1, you can get an instantaneous glide. And if we do this instead, so that's a way to transpose samples. So let me show you with something a little lower too, just as opposed to C, which has that, you know, that thing that you might not want. So using this global command, you can very easily get instantaneous slides. And let me show you the same thing, only now with our sample number 1. And I think we've seen this. You've seen this toggling between 1 and 12 when we hit this. So, you know, we're good there. Let's go ahead. Let's just swap out instruments. What is this? 0, 0 with instrument 0, 2. And we'll swap them. So now just with a continuous sample. So instantaneous there versus if this had been a C. And yeah, so this will also stay at 1. So if we continued to have this, this would sound more like an arpeggiation than anything, because they're instantaneous. Well, and it's just a little bit more well expressed here. But anyways, that is how you could do instantaneous sliding with the ZK command. And that is also a bunch of stuff about the glide command. You can do some really cool stuff with the glide command, but it is, I think, just one of the more confusing commands if you don't have a good explanation of it. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.